Our podcast is brought to you by We Push Back. In the last few years, a certain genre on social media has been plagued with informants who misrepresent the truth to benefit themselves. They've gone unchecked for far too long. This smoke and mirrors routine is what has plagued the criminal justice system, resulting in many wrongful convictions. We Push Back is about bringing attention to these informants who have little regard for the truth and offering a voice to all those impacted by their lies. This website will work as a united hub, bringing all related information to one portal. We Push Back.
Welcome back to A View from Mulberry Street. I am your host, Matthew J. Marry. And if I look a little shaggy today, and if I don't sound exactly as I always do, it's because I am entering day 3 of COVID. And I got knocked out 48 hours ago. I had COVID before, and they took 3 Pfizer shots, and I thought I was safe from COVID, but not so. And last Tuesday, I just got knocked out, and I couldn't move for 12 hours. And today, I'm moving around. I'm talking, I'm walking, and we're doing a podcast. And that's the kind of guy I am. I would never disappoint our viewers of A View from Mulberry Street because I'm a stand-up guy. And I'll let you know what that is a little bit later. Let's just put it this way. It's the opposite of what we're going to define today. Stand by. Our guest today is someone I've known for 40 or 50 years, someone who's very close to me. We've been through a lot together down on the Lower East Side, down on Mulberry Street, down in the 4th Ward, Knickerbocker Village. And we've kept in touch for years. I've visited Joe year after year in Sarasota, Florida, and we've spent, I would guess, thousands of hours of talking about various subjects, including the Yankees, which we will not talk about today, including politics, which we will not talk about today. But today, we're going to talk a little bit about Joe Bruno. Joe Bruno grew up in Little Italy, and then he served in Vietnam in the United States Navy. When he came back from Vietnam, he decided to live in Knickerbocker Village, the 4th Ward. What a place. Very unusual place for poor Joe Bruno, as he was a migrant from the 6th Ward to the 4th Ward. He had to learn a lot. Anyhow, he's a self-educated person who became a boxing judge, became a boxing writer, writing for famous publications such as Ring Magazine and many, many more. He was a sports columnist covering every kind of sport. Joe was an expert in every kind of sport. And when he was young, he was a star player in baseball and basketball. Anyhow, he wrote for the New York Tribune for quite a few years. And I watched him start his writing career as a novelist. Now, at this point, he is the author of over 60 books, 60. And you could find him on Amazon and other places. We're going to talk more about those books. You know, Joe writes about everything. He writes fiction. He writes real stuff. He does everything a writer could possibly do. But the books we're going to talk a little bit about later are the books that have some relevance to our subject matter. Some of those books are Mob Rats, Crazy Joe Gallo, Mobsters, Gangs, and Crooks, Whitey Bulger, Joe Valachi, Jimmy Hoffa. Those are just some of Joe's accomplishments as an author. And Joe, we're going to go into your books a little later on, but I want to talk a little bit with you about, you've seen all the podcasts, and we're talking about growing up in Little Italy. We're talking about, living in Knickerbocker Village, the 4th Ward. And you're the quintessential legitimate guy that I grew up with in the neighborhood. You're not a criminal. You never do anything wrong, but yet you kind of respected the code of the neighborhood. For example, you would never be a rat, even though you're a legitimate guy. But anyhow, why don't you talk a little bit about growing up in Little Italy, living in Knickerbocker Village, before you took off for sunny Sarasota, Florida?
Well, I grew up on Baxter Street, right across the street from the Tombs Prison, which was about 50 feet from my front door. And I lived in Columbus Park. I mean, I was there every day from the time I was 7 until 18, 19 when I went into the service. I moved to Knickerbocker Village.
Navy, right?
Naval, I was a parachute rigger on the USS Constellation on the flight deck. I packed the parachutes to the pilots. And every time they punched out over Vietnam with one of my chutes, they would buy me whatever kind of bottle of liquor I wanted. I think I always said Chivas Regal. And I got about 6, 7 bottles from the pilots that jumped. Now, if they didn't, the chute didn't open, I would have got court-martialed. Because you got to really screw up a chute for not to open. So I got out, I got married almost immediately. I got married in 1973. Lived in Knickerbocker. As you know, I owned the parking lot for 27 years. Everybody who was ever around Knickerbocker Village parked in my parking lot. Or I would sit outside all day and talk to everybody. Everybody passed by. I'm a very talkative guy. And I made a lot of friends, and I made a couple enemies too, but not because of anything I did, but because I wasn't from the neighborhood. I had to play my initiation.
Hey, Joe, would you say that sometimes, only sometimes, in the good old 4th Ward, Knickerbocker Village, that things might get a little bit hotter than even in Vietnam?
Oh yeah, but we can't talk about that.
You seem to navigate very well through a lot of controversial situations at your parking lot where people used to fight over spaces, life and death. Maybe blood could have been shed, and you had to be a mediator for a lot of things. And, we don't want to talk bad about anybody, not even the dead. But I know you had a lot of trouble with some people. But we've talked about a lot of people that the government has described as gangsters and, that bad guys, they're so bad. But you met a lot of people who are described by the government as members of organized crime and who are good to you. Who are your favorites?
My friend's Petey Red. Petey Red was a good friend of mine. My cousin Joe Red. I don't know if you know Joe Red. Joe Red Ferraro from back the street. My cousin.
Well, now Petey Red's real name was Peter D. Chiara. Yeah. And Peter D. Chiara, let me interject right now, was one of my favorite people in Knickerbocker Village. He was a tough guy, a good-hearted guy, a man among men. He represented our neighborhood, the 4th Ward. Everybody loved Petey Red, Peter D. Chiara. And he was such... Let me tell you that since he passed away prematurely, that I really miss that guy. I miss looking forward when I go down to see my mom in Knickerbocker Village. I would look for Peter to hope that I would see him. And he was a real tough guy. And he got you out of a lot of scrapes, didn't he?
Well, did I tell you a story about Petey? I'll give you an example. Petey, right next to my office, my shack, was a spot reserved for certain people. It was somebody's spot. That was their spot. Nobody else parked in it. And we had a guy that, I don't know if I should mention, I'm not going to mention his name. He lived on my floor in Knickerbocker. He was also allegedly an organized crime figure. And he wanted that spot. So I said, you can't, it's so-and-so spot. You can't have it, So he says, well, I better not see any strange cars in that spot. So one day I come down, and there's a car next to my shack with 4 flat tires. So it's Petey Red's father-in-law, Nancy's father. He had 4 flat tires. So I knew right away who did it. So I called Petey. I said, Petey, I got bad news. You had 4 flat tires. You know who did it, Joe? He said, no, Petey, I'm not a rat. Even if I knew who did it, I'm not going to tell you. And he told me, it's this guy. I said, well, how do you know it's that guy? Well, he came to my club at 3 in the morning and he borrowed an ice pick. We borrowed Petey's ice pick to give Petey's father-in-law 4 flats. Well, Petey was laughing. As it turned out, I went up to the guy's house. He was a very tough guy. Knocked on
You
the
know,
door.
Joe, I'm going to interrupt you. I know I said we shouldn't mention any names about bad things, but since he's dead and long gone, and since he's been spoken of on this program, I don't think Tony Mirra would mind if we identified him. He's the
Tony
guy.
Mirra.
He's the guy who gave Petey Red 4 flats, and boy,
Petey Red's
was he
father.
worried.
I went up to the house, knocked on the door about 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning. What do you want, you little so-and-so? He's cursing at me through the door. I said, by the way, the car you gave the 4 flats, that's Petey Red's father-in-law. Oh my God, I'll be right down, I'll be right down. Comes down, I drive him to Vic's on Delancey Street. He gets the guy to come back and change the 4 flat tires, right?
Right.
So I tell Pete, I get Pete, his car's okay now, he'll fix it. He says, yeah. I said, look, Pete, this guy's torturing me. About other things, you just torture him. Petey's my friend. He says, don't worry about it. He's not going to be around too much longer. Well, about a month later, he was not around too much longer.
Peter is certainly in heaven, and
Do you remember
hopefully.
when you told me about that? Do you remember when you told me? Do you remember when you called me on the phone? You said, Joe Bruno, you're the luckiest guy in the world. I said, why? So they killed Tony Mirra.
Well, you know, Tony loved me. Tony Mirra loved me, and I liked him too. He wasn't the most popular guy in the neighborhood, and you know, both Petey Red and he are gone. But I think they're in different places. They're certainly in different places. But you also had some experiences with a fellow that's been mentioned on this program a lot, Joe DiPalermo. Little Joe Becky, who was one of your customers. He parked in your lot. And, you know,
He was the guy that parked next to the shack. That was his spot.
Yeah, and you know, little Joe Becky was the kind of guy, when he walked into a room, he gave tips to everybody in the room. He took care of every waiter, every busboy. He took care of the bartender, even if he was never at the bar. He was just a high-class guy, like so many of the guys that we knew from Little Italy and Knickerbocker Village. And, you know, sometimes there were a lot of creeps in the neighborhood that tried to beat you or were always late on their payments for your parking lot. But
I had to go up to the house and knock on the door.
But little Joe Becky was sick one time, and he was late with his payment. And what did he do?
His wife comes down to the parking lot. Joe Becky came in at like 5 in the morning. I opened at 6. I never saw him. But then he left again around 2, 3 in the afternoon. Then I had seen him. But he was sick, so his wife said, do me a favor. Joey said, come up our apartment, and he wants to give you the rent. So I go up his apartment, and he's in the bedroom, sitting on the bed, and he's wearing a nightcap on his head with a ball and a string, like a string and a ball. The ball was hanging down. You gotta laugh. I mean, so he's going, don't you laugh. Don't you laugh. You don't like my hat, don't you laugh. I'm not gonna laugh. He goes, what's the matter? You don't like my hat? What's wrong with my hat? I bursted out laughing. He says, good kid. I got out of there. He was the friend. I could never go into a bar where he didn't pick up the ticket. And I couldn't buy him a drink.
Just a class guy. And it's the opposite of what the government portrays people to be. And, you know, maybe it's the opposite of what the government portrays people to be. And maybe it's true with regard to some of the guys that are around today. But, you know, we hear a lot about the so-called wise guys extorting neighborhood people and shaking people down that they knew. I mean, when we grew up in Little Italy and Knickerbocker Village, it was the exact opposite. These people were protecting everybody in the neighborhood, no matter who you were. If you were a big nobody and you went to somebody because somebody was, you know, harassing you or threatening you, 9 out of 10 times you're going to get somebody to stick up for you. It being a legitimate guy. In our neighborhood, being a legitimate guy had a lot of weight.
Well, let me tell you something about my father. When I got back from Vietnam, because I was a Vietnam veteran, I was allowed to get a license for a hot dog stand. I bought my father, who had just retired, he had never seen my hot dog stand. And I would push his hot dog stand in front of Cherry Street Park every morning and take it back at night. Well, there was a pizzeria in the neighborhood, I'm not going to mention names, that started calling the police up on my father, saying that he wasn't me. In other words, it was Joe Bruno, the license, it was my license. And he has the same name. So this person, and to a friend of ours, you know very well, the police detective, a very good friend of ours, found out who the guy was. So my father, I cannot mention any name, a good friend of ours, one of two brothers, you know what I'm talking about, and this police lieutenant went to visit the pizzeria. They lifted the guy up and put his head in the oven. Said, he said, what's from the neighborhood? Did you never call the cops in this neighborhood again? We're going to leave you in that oven. And then never wanted my father again.
And so, being a legitimate guy was not inconsistent with not being a rat. Because nobody in our neighborhood was ever a rat, especially a lot of legitimate guys. And I'm talking about all the guys who worked in the Fulton Fish Market. All the guys who worked in the New York Post, especially one of my very special clients who worked in the New York Post. These are legitimate guys who got in trouble for other people, but would never open their mouth, no matter what. And that's the kind of neighborhood that we grew up in. So I know I'm proud of it. I know you're proud of it. People might not understand us, but that's the way it was.
Well, let me tell you another story. One is around Christmas time, and I had a car service. I mean, a car service. I had like about 10 guys working for me. We went out like 20 people uptown. When I come back, there's a million police cars in front of my parking lot. And I try to get it. I said, I'm the owner. Somebody said there was a shooting in the back of your lot. And the Knickerbocker faced my lot with a million windows. And somebody said they saw somebody get shot in the back of your lot, but there's no body there, but there's blood. I said, what do I don't know anything about this. Well, it turned out they found the body around the corner of Mechanics Alley. But to make a long story short, next morning I opened up this police detectives. Come on, you know something. Let me tell you something, buddy. I got a key to the front gate. All my customers got free keys to the front gate. Anybody could have come in here. I don't even believe your story. I think somebody made it that up. I don't believe anybody shot in the back of my lot. And I don't believe there's blood back there. So do me a favor and take a walk. This conversation is over. If you want to speak to me again, you're going to have to speak to me in my lawyer's office. That was the end of the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Joe, I was lucky enough to witness all the various careers that you engaged in, from being a boxing judge to a boxing writer to a sports columnist, and then a novelist, and then the writer of factual books, and like the ones that we're talking about and going to talk about, Mob Rats, Crazy Joe Gallo, Whitey Bulger, Joe Valachi. So, you've written a lot about what we call rats. Sorry to use that term, but that's what we call them.
I wrote a 5-part series, Mob Rats, 5-part series.
And we're gonna get right to that. And people, for years, I've been a criminal defense lawyer for 46 years, and I'm 72 years old, and people are always, once in a while, talking about how so-and-so became a rat and the government turned that person. Well, I don't remember which book it was of yours, but for one of your books, you asked me to write out a definition, and I'm going to read it.
That was Mob Rats.
Yeah, well, you asked me to write out what makes a rat a rat. This is the back of one of your books. And it's a definition that I'd like the world to know about. Just like last week, I defined what a legitimate guy was in our neighborhood. Well, here's my very, very, I think, unique definition of what a rat is. And then I'm going to ask you to comment. And here's the definition I gave you, which you put on the back of one of your books.
It's Whitey Bulger's book. Book on Whitey Bulger.
Whitey Bulger book. Okay. And here it is. Give me a second. Contrary to public opinion, rats are born and not made. People think law enforcement turns people into rats by persuading them to turn state's evidence, as the old saying goes. There is a difference between the verb rat, which is what a lot of people do, and the noun rat, which is what a lot of people are. Real men don't rat because they still have to look at themselves in the mirror. The reason they don't rat is not because of some oath of silence. Oh, Murta. No, it's not because they are afraid of being killed, but because they simply are not rats. The people who rat, the verb, do it because they are rats, the noun. The people who rat were born rats and simply do what they were born to do when the circumstances benefit them. It's really very simple. So a lot of people who are rats go through their lives never having to rat, okay? They get away with it, being a rat, right? No one ever knows because they're never pressured. They're never facing 20, 40, life in prison, death penalty. I've represented many people facing the death penalty, and they didn't rat. Anyhow, so that was my definition of a rat. You know, I mean, you wrote so much about rats. Tell us a little bit about your book, Mob Rats.
Well, my book, Mob Rats, is part of a 5-part series. 5 different rats. Danny Green, Joe Valachi, Joe Valachi, Abe Kid Twist Rellis, a guy named Jack Rose in the early 1900s. 5 parts of 5 rats. Jimmy the Weasel Fradiano was the 5th one. So
okay.
There was no one book, Mob Rats. It was Mob Rats, volume 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then I put them all in one volume. But you're right. You would never know if somebody's a rat unless they put in a position where it's their advantage to be a rat. And then they all rat. But a person that's not a rat will tell the police, like I told the police, take a walk. Take a walk. No. Leave me alone. And cops have no right to question you, unless they're going to arrest you. So people think you got to talk to the police. No, you don't.
Now, Joe, did you write a book about Joe Valachi, or he's part of that book, Mob Rats? Oh, you wrote a whole book about Joe Valachi. That's very interesting. What inspired you to do that? Because it's been done before.
Because I wanted to find the 5 most famous rats I could find, or the 5 most insidious rats that I could find. Now, contrary to popular opinion, Joe Valachi was not a big guy in the mob. He was a broken down valise.
Yeah.
He was a broken down valise. And then he said that involved one of the guys that we mentioned before. He said in prison somebody was going to kill him, and he killed the guy first because the guy looked like him. Now, the guy we know, nobody looks like him.
Joe Valachi said that he became a rat because he saw little Joe Becky, Joseph D. Palermo, following him in Atlanta prison. I talked to little Joe Becky about that. He was laughing like hell. He said he never came near this guy. The guy was just having a total delusion, or he made it up.
Well, he made it up, but he killed the guy. He actually killed the guy that he said looked like Joe Becky. But nobody looks like Joe Becky.
Nobody, but nobody. Ever.
So he's lying.
Yeah. In addition to doing that work on Joe Valachi, you undertook another pretty big project that many people have written about. No one did it better than you, and that's the book about Whitey Bulger. That's the book where my saying about rats is the back cover of your book about Whitey Bulger. Tell us a little bit about why you did the Whitey Bulger story.
Well, Whitey Bulger became a rat in the 50s, but nobody knew about it. He was arrested on an armed robbery case, and he gave up his partner, and he got a reduced sentence. That's when he went sent to Alcatraz. So he was a rat from the beginning. Then, when he gets out of prison, and he started moving up the hierarchy, and he started ratting, but only against the Italians in Boston. Only Italians. And his partner was Steve Fleming, who was Italian. So he rationalized to himself he wasn't really a rat because he only ratted against the Italians, and they're inferior human beings.
And by the way, Joe, after he would rat on the Italians who he was working with hand in hand, he would then take over their businesses while they were in jail, and he became a multimillionaire, and the FBI all the time was working with Whitey, helping him all along. And then once in a while, when someone would pop up in law enforcement and want to rat on Whitey Bulger, the FBI tipped Whitey off. And you know what happened to those guys? Goodbye.
Well, the FBI agent John Connolly, who worked with Whitey Bulger's neighbor, was younger than Bulger, he's doing life in prison now for just that. He was the guy that was enabling Whitey Bulger to do everything illegal, including committing murders, while he was under FBI protection. Whitey Bulger killed people while he was supposedly working for the FBI.
You know, you decided to do another book about a guy named Crazy Joe Gallo, who we have talked about on this show. And Crazy Joe Gallo happened to be killed in our neighborhood in Umberto's restaurant at his own birthday party one night. So what inspired you to write that book? And did you find out facts that no one else has ever been able to reveal?
I was there the night he was killed, but not when he was killed. I left like 1 in the morning. We were at MetLife. I stopped in Little Italy before I went back to Knickerbocker. And that night, instead of going to Vincent's or the Limehouse, I decided to go on Umberto's. So Matty was there, and I'm eating. I left about 1 o'clock. What had happened, Joe Gallo was at a birthday party at the Copacabana with Jerry Orbach and Jerry Orbach's wife, Joey Gallo's new wife and Joey Gallo's wife's daughter, and a guy named Pete the Greek was his bodyguard, supposedly. Now, after this is all over, he wants to go back to Little Italy. He wants to go to Luna's to celebrate. In the neighborhood, he knows everybody's looking to kill him. He knows everybody in Luna's looking to kill him. Luna's is closed, and he's driving down the block, and he sees Matty hanging outside the Umberto's, and Matty's a part owner. And he convinced Matty to open the place up.
You mean Matty the horse, Matthew Ianniello?
Yes.
Okay.
There were people in the place. They just weren't letting any new people in.
So Umberto's was closing that night. Crazy Joe arrives and was able to convince the owner, Matty the horse Ianniello, to open it up because it was Joe's birthday.
Well, now a guy named Joe Lucarelli, Joe Beach, sees Crazy Joe Gallo going into Umberto's. He runs to a bar nearby with his organized crimes alleged figures, and he tells them Crazy Joe Gallo just walked into Umberto's. So the people, I can mention the guy's name, Sonny Pinto. He's in my book, and he's a matter of record of the FBI. Sonny Pinto shot Joe Gallo.
Sonny's dead now, so you can talk about him.
Yes, his real name was Carmine DiBiase.
Right.
And what happened, after they went in and killed Joe Gallo, they go to a hideaway in Nyack, New York. And Joe B started getting delusions that they were going to kill him. He gets on a plane and flies to L.A.
Now, Joe Beach is a nickname. How would you spell that? How did you spell that?
P-S-C-H-B. Means fish, like Pesci. But they call it Joe Beach. P-E-S-C-H-E. Like it would say, it's fish in Italian.
Okay.
But he goes to L.A. and goes to the FBI offices and get information on the killing of Crazy Joe Gallo. Nobody in L.A. heard of Crazy Joe Gallo. They called the FBI in New York. We got this guy, he said, wait, hold. So they sent like 10 FBI agents to California to get Joe Beach back. At that point, everybody, the FBI, police department, and almost everybody in the neighborhood knew who the killer was. Yet some people insist on saying Frank, the Irishman Sheeran, killed Crazy Joe Gallo.
Pitiful. That was so pitiful. I mean, I liked the movie. It was fantasy. Everything was fantasy. Everybody knows who killed Crazy Joe Gallo. Everyone in the neighborhood. And
Monsko says he's from the neighborhood. Monsko says he's from our neighborhood. He knew who the real killer was. When he was asked about it, you know what he said? He says, what? Really? They asked him, how you know that Frank Sheeran didn't kill Crazy Joe Gallo. You're crazy. Who cares? It's a movie. Well, the people that were involved care. Their families care. I had somebody involved. I'm not going to get into that. But, you don't lie and then say, who cares?
Right. I know that certainly you had an interest in doing a book on Crazy Joe Gallo because, he got killed in our neighborhood. And the funny thing about that is that Little Italy at that time was moribund business-wise. All the restaurants were closing down. Even the social clubs were closing down. And after Joe Gallo got killed and the movie The Godfather was released, there was a rejuvenation of Little Italy that lasts right up until today. It's like Joe Gallo is responsible for reviving business in Little Italy.
Before that, there was maybe 10 restaurants in the neighborhood. Maybe 10, maybe not even 10. Three below Canal Street and 5 or 6 above Canal Street. After that, there's a restaurant in every corner. They said, this is the way you make money,
Yeah. Tourists would come after Crazy Joe got killed by the busload. And they get out to look at the bullets on the wall across the street. It's kind of strange about the fascination that people have with all this stuff. But let me ask you this, Joe. You wrote a book about Jimmy Hoffa. Now, that's a strange one, only because there's been so many books about Jimmy. I mean, what was different about yours?
I approached it from 5 different angles. First of all, nobody knows who killed Jimmy Hoffa. One of the guys I said who possibly could have killed him was Frank Sheeran. But do you remember when I was on your radio program and you had Charles Brandt on the same time? The guy that wrote the book, I Heard You Paint Houses, and how I questioned him on your program. I said, wait a minute, the whole world knows who killed Crazy Joe Gallo. Why do you insist on saying Frank Sheeran killed him? And all we heard was dead air. And he started talking about something else.
Yeah, because it was nonsense. But do you I won't ask you too much who killed Jimmy Hoffa, but do you know where he's buried?
No, let me tell you, he was incinerated within a half hour when he was shot. They shot him in a building. He was either taken to an incinerator nearby, which is the most likely explanation, or a wood chipper nearby, or a car compactor. You're not going to put Jimmy Hoffa, one of the most famous men in the world, in a car and drive him 1,000 miles to the Netherlands to bury him. What kind of moron does something like that? And yet people believe it. And every time a mobster's in jail, his get out of jail covers, I know where Jimmy Hoffa is buried. He was never buried. They incinerated him. They obliterated him. That's it. He was never buried.
My favorite book of yours of all time is a multi-volume book called Mobsters, Gangs, and Crooks.
And Other Creeps.
And Other Creeps. And what I like about that book is that you don't have to read it from page 1 to page 374 or whatever it is. It's all mini chapters about different people from the 1800s, the 1900s, and right up until almost the present time. And it's like if you wanted to read about Frank Costello, you could pick up your book and read 3 or 4 pages. People don't want to read 600 pages about everybody they've ever heard of. But in your volumes, your multi-volume series, Mobsters, Gangs, and Crooks, and Other Creeps, you write about so many people, and you condense it into a chapter form that's so easy to read and for people to skip around. I mean, how did you develop that in your own mind to do it that way?
I started off thinking about one book, turned into 5 books. I just saw so many people came into my mind. I did a lot of research in the 1800s, with all the gangsters of the 1800s, and there was female gangsters in the 1800s. And I said, this is more than one book. So I wrote volume 1, then I wrote volume 2, then I wrote volume 3, then I wrote volume 4. And I came up with an idea. Volume 5 was going to be Mobsters, Gangs, Crooks, and Other Creeps, their girlfriends and wives. So the last book is all female. All the mob women either were mobsters themselves or were married or had mobster boyfriends. And one of them was Arlene Weiss, who came from our neighborhood. Did you know that? Arlene Weiss Wigman was from Knickerbocker Village.
I did not know that. Well, from reading your books, I found out a lot about the history of crime. I mean, if anyone is interested in the history of crime, I mean, you don't only talk about organized crime. You talk about all crime from the annals of police department records. You did a lot on the 5 points.
5 points. I would have booked on 5 points.
The 5 points gang.
The movie by Scorsese, the whole movie's a lie. Bernard, DiCaprio's character never existed.
Yeah.
I mean, 5 points. Going back to 1826.
Did you write anything about the 5 points gang? Contradicting the movie?
Nothing in the movie was true.
Nothing.
Butcher Bill Poole was Daniel Day-Lewis. They got him being killed in a gang war. He was shot in the head at Stanzig's bar on Prince Street. From behind, I went back, bingo, they shot him in the back of the head. So the whole, and Scorsese again, it's Hollywood. He wrote the screenplay and he directed it. None of it was true. Caprio was the main character, never existed.
Hey, Joe, before we go, I want you to tell us exactly how our viewers can click in quickly and see the body of work that you've done. Anybody who's interested in crime at all could spend a lifetime just reading your book. So how do they click in to you? And do you have a website?
On Amazon, I have an author's page. Just search Joe Bruno and Mobsters or Gangsters or Mafia or something like that, and all my books will come up. In fact, on that page, my author's page, you wrote half the bio.
Yes, I remember.
You wrote half the bio. So that's how you do it.
So whoever wants to get everything that you're doing, have done, they could go just to Amazon, plug in Joe Bruno, author, crime, mob, mafia, all that stuff. Is there anything new that you've written lately that you want to bring to our attention, or something special?
I got it right here. Tragedies in the square ring. It's about people that were killed in the ring in boxing.
Yeah.
And I was actually at one of the fights when somebody was killed.
Benny Kit Perrette and Emil Griffith?
Yeah, that's in the book. Okay. I also Wilfred Ciprian and killed Willie Klassen in Madison Square Garden. I was the judge that night. I was the boxing judge. And then Bert Sugar was a friend of mine. I met him at the news school when I was taking the course. He calls me up on Monday. I'm a boxing judge. Calls me up, said, "Look, you were the judge, right? We need a story." And at that point, Jack Prendeville, who appointed me, told us, "Don't speak to the press." But I was already a member of the press. I was waiting for East Village newspaper, owned by the Village Voice. So I wrote the story for Bert Sugar, and it appeared in the February issue. And Prendeville called me to his office. And he says, "I told you don't speak to the press." I said, "But you forget I am the press. You mean don't speak to the press?" "Well, I'm going to have to let you go because..." And I said, "Well, you made this." First of all, Wilfred Ciprian, Willie Klassen, should never have been allowed in the ring. He was knocked out 30 days previous in England, and the commission didn't know. So they put a guy in the ring that should have been fighting in the first place. And I outlined all of the mistakes. You know what he says to me? "Well, I'm sorry, you have to remember something. I'm the one that appointed you as a boxing judge."
Whoa. Whoa.
It's another mistake you made. It's another mistake you made. I walked out of the
Joe, you spent a lot of time. I'm going to wrap it up soon, but you spent a lot of time attacking people in the boxing industry that you felt were ruining the game. Like, who was the big guy, the promoter?
Don King.
Who?
I screwed Don King out of $50,000.
Don King. Yeah, I know. Speaking of boxing, I got to keep going. I talked last week on the episode about legitimate guys, a couple of weeks ago, about when we met Muhammed Ali. And at the end of the night, he was thanking us because we took his part in a dispute at the Boxing Writers Dinner. I forgot also to mention that you were the vice president of the Boxing Writers of America.
In 1986, I invited you and Junior. We decided to open, not me, Bonnie Nagel was the president, I'm the vice president, decided to open it up to the public. In 2 hours, we sold 500 tickets and we closed it. Only one problem. Muhammad Ali hated Bonnie Nagel. So they come to me, knowing I'm a friend of Muhammad Ali, and have me call him up in Chicago. I don't get him on the phone, I get one of his guys. And I tell him, I'm the vice president. We'll get you free tickets on the plane. We'll put you up at 2 suites at the Taft Hotel. We'll pay for everything for 2 days. You don't pay for nothing. We had the dinner, and you were there. You were there, and Bonnie Nagel sort of insulted me and you, but we wanted us to get rid of a crowd around Ali. He said, "You guys know how to handle this," meaning you Italian guys. And I told him off.
Meaning is Bonnie alive now?
That's a long time ago.
Okay, we could use his name. In other words, he's trying to say that we were thugs just because we're Italian Americans. You've experienced that before, correct?
Yeah, but now he wore a colostomy bag. And I said, "Bonnie, you ever insult me and my friends again, I'm going to make you eat that colostomy bag." The following day.
That sounds a little thuggish, Joe.
The following day, I get a phone call from Muhammad Ali's people at the Taft Hotel that the boxing writers didn't pick up their bill for 2 suites. And we're not told to pick up the bill. I go to the Taft Hotel, I use my credit card, and I paid the bill. $2,700, something like that. This is 85, a lot of money. I go right to the boxing commission. Marvin Coleman was the treasurer. Him and Bonnie were 2 buddies, robbing the place blind for years. He's dead though. And I said, "Marvin, here's the tab. Write me out a check right now." "Oh, I don't have the checkbook from the Boxing Writers Association." I see his briefcase. I pick up his briefcase. I empty it on his desk. Sure enough, there's the checkbook for the Boxing Writers. Now we were on the 20th floor on the corner of Chambers and Broadway. I said, "Marvin, you're going to write me out this check now, or I'm going to throw you out that window."
Oh, boy. No wonder they thought you were a thug.
They wouldn't pay Muhammad Ali's bill. I couldn't believe it.
Well, listen, let's get back to Muhammad Ali. We were able to secure for him that night rooms for him and his colleagues, and he thanked us at the end of the night, the heavyweight champ of the world, correct?
The next day. In other words, when he went to leave, they told him, "You owe us this money, $2,700.
Yeah, so you got stuck with the bill.
Yeah, but I made Marvin. I finally got the check. I made him write the check, and I was going to throw him out the window. I would have thrown him out the window, but I would have got really nasty.
Listen, they were not nice. They were.
Have Muhammad Ali insulted. You know what I'm saying?
You know, Muhammad Ali treated us with a lot of respect that night. And on another night, you mentioned Buster Douglas. And on the second, Buster Douglas unexpectedly knocked out Mike Tyson for the heavyweight crown. And the rematch, you and I were going. We were invited by Rudy Riska to be part of a VIP room, and we were going to watch the video of the rematch.
It wasn't a rematch. It wasn't a rematch. It was Douglas fighting Holyfield for the title.
Okay. All right. So it was Holyfield against Buster Douglas defending the crown.
Defending in the VIP room of the DAC, yeah.
Okay. And we went to the downtown athletic club, and we were told by Rudy he's going to place us at the table next to Joe D so that we could rub elbows with him. And indeed, we were right next to Joe D, and when we turned to the screen, my elbow was next to his. And I told you at the beginning of the night, I said, you know, at the end of this night, Matthew Merry and Joe DiMaggio are going to be best friends. But it didn't turn out that way. Why don't you tell the story?
Well, all I remember is this. A young kid in a suit came back. I know DiMaggio didn't want to be bothered with nobody. He wanted to knock and sign no autographs. And we're sitting next to him. A young kid with a suit came in and asked for an autograph. And DiMaggio went crazy, screaming, "I told you I'm never coming back here again. I told you nobody comes back. It's a private room. How'd you let him get in here?" And our bubble was burst.
Yeah.
But 10 years earlier, I was at a dinner with Rudy at the Downtown Athletic Club. I brought my father, who was on just about dead. My father had 6 months to live. After the dinner, DiMaggio was sitting at the next table with Billie Jean King. My father gets up, walks over, taps DiMaggio on the shoulder. Nobody taps DiMaggio on the shoulder. DiMaggio invites him to sit down. DiMaggio pulls out a cigarette, gives it to my father, and he lights my father's cigarette. And they sit there talking for about 20 minutes.
Really?
Me and Rudy are like looking at each other like, what the hell's going on here? What had happened, my father was born in Sicily. And DiMaggio's parents came from the same town in Sicily. And DiMaggio wanted to speak with somebody in Sicilian dialect that his father used to speak in. He had my father, they were talking in Sicilian for about 20 minutes. My father comes back, and my father was the type of guy who wasn't afraid of nobody. He says, "No, he's a good guy." I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "He wanted to speak to me in Sicilian. There's nobody speaks Sicilian anymore." He wanted me, he reminded him of his father, his growing up in San Francisco. And the same guy that was so nice to my father was so mean to that kid.
Yeah. Well, one thing is for sure. That night, we were really disappointed because I actually thought that at the end of the night, we're going to be sitting at Joe D's table. But, I know what he meant about autographs. Autographs turned out to be his business. And that's what he did for a living. And he didn't want to be hounded anywhere. I know that Dr. Rock Positano used to take great pains to make sure that every place he went to eat with Joe DiMaggio in New York, that before he got into the restaurant, everything was secure, that everybody knew no one was to approach Joe. But yet, Dr. Rock, in his book, Dinner with DiMaggio, he says that many times Joe on his own would just get up and talk to people. But he wanted to do it on his own. He just didn't want to be approached. And hey, he's Joe DiMaggio. Joe...
Very friendly to my father. Very friendly.
We're going to bring this to a close for now. I'm definitely going to have you back again because I know you've got a lot of great stories. That's what your Hall of Fame ring from the Boxing Writers of Florida.
Right, no, the Florida Hall of Fame.
Oh, okay, the Florida
Boxing Hall of Fame.
Boxing Hall of Fame. Pick that ring up again. I want to see if it's real. Come on. Okay. Is that really yours? It doesn't seem to fit you.
My name's in there. Name's in the middle. By the way, after the show, let's go down to the Bowery. Maybe we can go to a pawn shop. Maybe we can make some money on this.
Okay. Well, Joe Bruno, I want to thank you so much for being my friend all these years, for all the great conversations that we've had about politics, about the Yankees, about the neighborhood. And I'm glad that the people who view this podcast can get a chance to see you and to hear you. And hopefully they'll go to Amazon.com and to look you up. And let me tell you, they're not going to be disappointed with what they find if they're interested in crime. That's Joe Bruno. This is Matthew Mary. And that's a view from Mulberry Street.